I'll never forget the moment my 8-year-old granddaughter, Lila, stood up in that courtroom, her small, trembling voice cutting through the tension like a blade of truth. The judge had just asked her a simple question about who she wanted to live with, and everyone expected the usual, carefully rehearsed answer. Instead, my little girl, wearing the sunflower dress I'd sewn for her birthday because she said it made her feel brave, looked directly at Judge Margaret Tilling and said something that shattered everything. "Your Honor, should I tell you why Uncle Ray really wants to keep me and Mommy away? The thing he said about Grandma Abbie's money?" The entire courtroom froze. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. I watched Raymond Burke's face transform from confident smugness to absolute terror in a matter of heartbeats. His high-priced attorney started rising from his chair, mouth opening to object. My daughter-in-law Claire grabbed my hand under the table, her fingers ice-cold and shaking. We both knew something massive was about to explode. Raymond jumped up from his seat so fast his chair clattered backward onto the floor. His face flushed crimson, veins bulging in his neck as he roared at my granddaughter, "Shut up. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Don't listen to her." But Judge Tilling was already in motion. Her gavel slammed down with such force it echoed through the courtroom like thunder. "Bailiff. Mr. Burke, sit down immediately or you will be held in contempt of court." Two uniformed bailiffs moved swiftly toward Raymond, positioning themselves on either side of him. He stood there, fists clenched at his sides, breathing hard, looking like a cornered predator. The man who'd spent 6 weeks painting Claire as an unstable, unfit mother, who'd walked into court that morning absolutely certain he was going to take my granddaughter away from us, was watching his meticulously crafted lies begin to unravel. Judge Tilling turned back to Lila, her voice softening but remaining firm. "Lila, sweetheart, you're safe here. Take your time. Tell me what you need to say." I felt my breath catch in my throat. My granddaughter's small hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair, her knuckles white. She looked so tiny up there, her feet dangling above the floor, the yellow sunflowers on her dress bright against the dark wood paneling of the courtroom. But when she spoke again, her voice was steady. "Daddy Ray said if I told the truth, we'd all get in trouble," Lila began, and I saw Judge Tilling lean forward slightly. "He said I should tell you that Mommy is too sad to take care of me. But that's not true, Your Honor. Mommy makes me pancakes and reads to me every night." Raymond tried to interject, "Your Honor, she's been..." "Mr. Burke, I will not warn you again." Judge Tilling's eyes were steel. "Continue, Lila." My granddaughter took a deep breath, and I silently willed every ounce of strength I had into her small body. "Daddy Ray said if I help him win, we can buy a big house and go to Disney World. But then..." She paused, and I saw tears beginning to well in her eyes. "But then he talks to a lady named Vanessa on the phone all the time. And I heard him say that Grandma Abbie has lots of money in a trust for me, and if he wins, he can use it to pay his bad people back." The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed from the gallery. Raymond's attorney shot to his feet, objecting to something. I couldn't even hear what over the sudden buzz of voices. Judge Tilling's gavel came down again and again, calling for order. "He said Grandma won't be around much longer anyway," Lila continued, her voice breaking now, tears streaming down her face. "He said it doesn't matter." I felt like someone had driven a stake through my heart. Claire was weeping beside me, her hand crushing mine. Across the aisle, Raymond had gone completely still, his face ashen now instead of red. His lawyer was frantically whispering to him, but Raymond just stared at Lila like she'd betrayed him. She'd betrayed his lies with truth. Judge Tilling waited for silence to fall again before speaking. "Mr. Burke, you and your attorney will approach the bench. Now." What Lila said next didn't just save our family. It exposed a betrayal so calculated, so vicious, that even now, months later, it still makes my blood run cold to think about it, a scheme that had been brewing since the day my husband George died and I quietly set aside $2 million in a trust for my granddaughter's future. My name is Abbie Graham. Most people call me Abbie. I'm 68 years old, a grandmother who thought she'd seen the worst life could throw at her. Until that moment in the courtroom, I'd believed I understood human nature. I'd raised a son, buried a husband, weathered grief and loss. But I'd never imagined the depth of greed that could live inside someone I'd welcomed into my family like a son. You see, Raymond wasn't just trying to divorce Claire. He wasn't fighting for custody of Lila because he loved her or even because he believed Claire was genuinely unfit. He was after something far more sinister, and he'd been planning it for 3 years, since the day my son Ethan died in that terrible car accident, and Raymond swooped in like a savior to help his grieving widow. When someone files for divorce and claims your daughter-in-law is mentally unstable and emotionally unfit to parent, you expect certain things. You expect custody battles and lawyers in expensive suits. You expect accusations and character witnesses who twist everyday moments into evidence of incompetence. What you don't expect is for your 8-year-old granddaughter to reveal that the man you trusted has been coaching children to lie, manipulating them with promises of Disney World and threats, all to steal their inheritance right out from under them. That morning had started like every other court day in this 6-week nightmare. I'd woken before dawn, too anxious to sleep anyway. Made breakfast for Claire and Lila even though my stomach was twisted in knots and I couldn't manage more than coffee. I'd helped Lila into the sunflower dress, yellow cotton with hand-stitched petals around the collar, and braided her dark hair the way she liked it, with the white ribbon she said reminded her of her daddy. Claire had been so quiet, her face pale and drawn, wearing the navy dress we'd bought together at the thrift store because Raymond had frozen all her accounts. She looked defeated before we'd even walked into the courtroom. Raymond had arrived in his black BMW, wearing what I later learned was a $4,000 suit, looking every inch the successful construction company owner he wanted everyone to believe he still was. He'd brought character witnesses, business associates who testified to his stability and responsibility. Financial statements that made Claire's part-time library job look pitiful by comparison. For 6 weeks, he'd been building his case like a master architect. Photographs of Claire looking exhausted at the grocery store just weeks after Ethan's funeral. Testimony from neighbors who'd heard Lila crying. Carefully edited text messages that made Claire's normal parental concerns sound like paranoia. Each piece of evidence had been selected, curated, and presented to paint a portrait of a woman falling apart, too broken by grief to care for her own child. And God help me, I'd almost started to believe it myself. That's what happens when someone you trust turns your family's grief into a weapon against you. You start questioning everything. Maybe Claire really was too fragile right now. Maybe Lila would be better off with someone who had money, resources, stability. Maybe I was just a bitter old woman clinging to my granddaughter because I'd already lost my husband and my son. But then Lila climbed into that witness chair and told the truth that would save us all. Judge Tilling returned from her bench conference, her expression unreadable. Raymond's attorney looked like he'd swallowed glass. Raymond himself had his head down, shoulders hunched. This court will recess for 15 minutes, Judge Tilling announced. When we return, I expect to hear testimony from the private investigator retained by Mrs. Greystone's counsel. Mr. Burke, you will remain in this courtroom under bailiff's supervision. As the judge exited, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. Claire turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with something I hadn't seen in months, hope. Mom, she whispered. Did that really just happen? I squeezed her hand. It did, sweetheart. And we're going to finish this. Because the truth was about to come out. All of it. The affair with Vanessa, his secretary. The construction company drowning in $900,000 of debt. The coached lies and the manipulation. The scheme to access a trust fund meant to secure Lila's future, not pay off his creditors. And there was nothing Raymond Burke could do to stop it. To understand how we got here, how a man I'd trusted like a son became the monster trying to destroy my family, you need to know what happened after my son Ethan died 3 years ago, on a rainy October night that changed everything forever. 3 years earlier, the night Ethan died, it was raining so hard I could barely see the road through my windshield. The police officer's voice on the phone had been professional, almost gentle, but the words hit me like a physical blow. Mrs. Graham, there's been an accident. Your son didn't survive. I'm so sorry. I don't remember driving to Claire's house. I don't remember parking or walking up the front steps. What I do remember is opening that door and seeing my daughter-in-law sitting on the floor in the hallway, still wearing her bathrobe, holding Ethan's jacket and sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. 5-year-old Lila stood beside her in pink pajamas, patting her mother's shoulder and saying, "It's okay, Mommy. Don't cry. Please don't cry." That image is burned into my memory forever. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and sympathetic murmurs and casseroles that nobody ate. Claire moved through those days like a ghost, her face blank, her eyes hollow. She'd wake up and forget for a moment that Ethan was gone, then remember, and I'd watch her crumble all over again. Lila stopped sleeping through the night. She'd crawl into bed with Claire, and they'd both lie there awake until dawn. I tried to be strong for them. I'd lost my husband George just 6 months earlier to a heart attack, and the grief was still raw, still crushing. But now I'd lost my son too, my only child, and I had to keep breathing because Claire and Lila needed me. That's when Raymond Burke stepped in. He'd been Ethan's business partner for nearly 7 years, co-owners of Burke and Graham Construction. They'd been close friends since college, and Raymond had been at the funeral looking genuinely devastated. He'd given the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about Ethan's loyalty, his work ethic, his love for his family. "Ethan was my brother," Raymond had said, tears streaming down his face. "And I promise you, Claire, Lila, I will always be here for you. Always." At the time, I thought it was beautiful. Comforting. The promise of a friend who wouldn't abandon them. I should have known better. It started small. Raymond showed up at Claire's house the day after the funeral to fix a leaking faucet she'd mentioned. "Ethan would have handled this," he said gently. "So I will." Then he brought groceries the following week because Claire had barely left the house. Then he offered to babysit Lila so Claire could attend a grief counseling session I'd arranged. He mowed the lawn. Changed the oil in Claire's car. Brought Chinese food on Friday nights because he knew it was Lila's favorite. "He's just being kind," Claire told me when I gently suggested maybe he was around a little too much. "He misses Ethan too, Mom. And honestly, I don't know how I'd manage without the help right now." I swallowed my concerns. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Raymond really was just being a good friend. God knows Claire needed all the support she could get. But there was something about the way he looked at her sometimes, not with the eyes of a grieving friend, but with something more calculating. Something that made my skin prickle with unease. Within 6 months, Raymond wasn't just helping anymore. He was there every day. He'd let himself in with the key Ethan had given him years ago. He'd make breakfast for Lila before school. He'd stay for dinner. He'd tuck Lila into bed and read her stories. "He's filling the hole Ethan left," Claire said when I expressed concern again. "Lila's finally sleeping through the night again, Mom. She's smiling again. Can't you just be happy for us?" I tried. I really did. Then, 11 months after Ethan died, Claire called me with news that made my stomach drop. "Raymond proposed," she said, her voice bright in a way I hadn't heard since before the accident. "We're getting married next month. Small ceremony, just family. He says we've all grieved long enough, and it's time to start building a new life. A new family." "Claire, sweetheart, don't you think this is a little fast?" I kept my voice gentle, but my heart was pounding. "You're still processing Ethan's death. Maybe you should wait a little longer, make sure." "Make sure of what?" Her tone sharpened. "That I'm not making a mistake. Raymond has been nothing but supportive, Mom. He loves Lila like she's his own daughter. He's helped me keep the house, manage the bills, everything. Ethan would want us to be happy. Would he?" I wanted to ask. Would Ethan really want his best friend marrying his widow less than a year after his death? But I didn't say it. I couldn't risk pushing Claire away, not when she was still so fragile. So I smiled and told her I was happy for her, and I helped her pick out a simple white dress for the courthouse ceremony. Raymond and Claire were married on a Tuesday afternoon in October, exactly 11 months after Ethan's funeral. I stood beside them as a witness, watched Raymond slip a ring on Claire's finger, and felt a cold dread settle in my bones. At the reception dinner, just the four of us at an Italian restaurant, Raymond raised his glass in a toast. To family, he said, looking directly at me. To moving forward. And to making sure Lila has everything she deserves. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. The red flags started appearing almost immediately after the wedding. Raymond began suggesting that Claire didn't need to visit me so often. "You're at your mother's house 3 times a week, honey," he'd say, his tone light but pointed. "Don't you think Lila needs more stability at home? More routine?" When Claire hesitated, he'd add, "I'm just thinking of what's best for our family. Your mom has her own life. We shouldn't be depending on her so much." The visits became twice a week, then once a week, then every other week. He started dismissing my advice in front of Claire. When I suggested Lila might benefit from continued counseling, Raymond laughed. "Abbie, with all due respect, therapy is for people who can't handle their problems. Lila is fine. She has 2 parents who love her now. That's all she needs." When I recommended a particular preschool program for Lila, he cut me off mid-sentence. "We've already enrolled her somewhere else. Somewhere more modern. No offense, Abbie, but your ideas are a little outdated." Claire would give me apologetic looks but never contradicted him. The worst part was listening to Lila start parroting his words. "Daddy Ray says Grandma makes Mommy sad," she told me one afternoon when I picked her up for our weekly lunch date. We were 6 months into Raymond and Claire's marriage. I froze, the car keys halfway to the ignition. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lila shrugged, swinging her legs in the booster seat. "He says when Mommy visits you, she comes home crying. He says it's because you remind her too much of when Daddy Ethan was alive, and it makes her sad." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And what do you think, Lila? Do you think Grandma makes Mommy sad?" She considered this carefully, her face serious. "I think Mommy cries sometimes. But I think she cries at home too, when Daddy Ray isn't looking." Out of the mouths of babes. I tried to talk to Claire about it, but she'd become distant, defensive. "Raymond just wants what's best for us, Mom. If he thinks the visits are hard on me, maybe he's right. Maybe I do need to focus on moving forward instead of constantly looking back." I felt my daughter-in-law slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. After my husband George passed, I'd sold our family home, the big Victorian where I'd raised Ethan, where he'd brought Claire home for the first time, where we'd celebrated Lila's birth. The memories were too heavy, the rooms too empty. I moved into a smaller house closer to town and focused on managing George's estate. That's when I decided to set up the trust fund. George had been a meticulous financial planner. Between his life insurance, investments, and the sale of his pharmacy business, I had more money than I'd ever need. I lived simply. I didn't want luxury or travel. What I wanted was to ensure that Lila would have security, opportunity, education, everything George and I had dreamed of giving our grandchildren. So I worked with our family attorney, Martin Chen, to establish a $2 million trust in Lila's name. It would be inaccessible until she turned 25, managed by trustees, protected from anyone who might try to exploit it. "I want this kept quiet," I told Martin. "Claire doesn't need to know the exact amount right now. She's got enough to worry about." "What about Raymond?" Martin asked, frowning. "He's Lila's legal stepfather now. He might have questions." "Tell him it's a standard educational trust," I said firmly. Nothing more. I didn't know why I felt the need to hide it from Raymond. Call it instinct. Call it the nagging unease that had been growing since the wedding. But something told me that Raymond Burke shouldn't know exactly how much money was sitting in my granddaughter's future. Of course, Raymond found out anyway. About a month after I'd finalized the trust, he casually mentioned it over Sunday dinner at their house. "So, Abbie," he said, cutting into his steak. Claire mentioned you set up some kind of college fund for Lila. That's generous. I kept my expression neutral. Just want to make sure she has opportunities, Raymond. George would have wanted that. Of course, of course. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. How much are we talking about? Ballpark? Enough, I said carefully. Why do you ask? He shrugged, taking a sip of wine. Just thinking about financial planning. You know, making sure we're coordinating our efforts for Lila's future. As her father, I should probably know these things. Stepfather, I wanted to correct. But I didn't. It's all handled through the attorney, I said instead. Nothing for you to worry about. Something flickered across his face, irritation, maybe, or calculation. But he smiled again and changed the subject. That night, lying awake in my empty house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. Not in setting up the trust, but in letting Raymond know it existed at all. Because a man who'd married his dead best friend's widow less than a year after his death, who was systematically isolating her from her mother, who seemed more interested in control than comfort, that man might see a $2 million trust fund as something other than a gift for a little girl's future. He might see it as an opportunity. I just didn't know yet how far he'd be willing to go to seize it. By the time Raymond and Claire's first anniversary rolled around, I barely recognized my daughter-in-law anymore. The vibrant woman who'd once taught elementary school, who'd organized neighborhood block parties and sang off-key while making pancakes, that woman had disappeared. In her place was someone quieter, more hesitant, constantly looking over her shoulder as if waiting for criticism. And Raymond was always there to provide it. I noticed it first during a family dinner at their house. Claire had made pot roast, Ethan's favorite, and she'd set the table with the good china we'd given them as a wedding gift. She seemed almost happy that evening, humming as she brought the dishes to the table. "This looks wonderful, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. Raymond cut into the meat, took a bite, and set down his fork with an exaggerated sigh. "It's a little dry, Claire. I've told you before, you need to check the internal temperature. Didn't we discuss this last week?" The light in Claire's eyes dimmed instantly. "I'm sorry. I thought I followed the recipe exactly. That's the problem." "You don't think?" He said it with a smile, as if it were a joke, but his eyes were cold. "You just do what some recipe tells you without using common sense. That's why things don't turn out right." Lila, now 6 years old, stared down at her plate, pushing peas around with her fork. "I think it's delicious," I said firmly, taking another bite. "Best pot roast I've had in months." Raymond's smile tightened. "Well, Abbie, you've always been easy to please. Claire needs to hold herself to higher standards if she wants to be taken seriously." "Taken seriously by whom?" I wanted to ask. But Claire was already clearing the plates, apologizing again, her shoulders hunched in defeat. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. Over the following months, I watched Raymond's control tighten like a noose. He convinced Claire to quit her part-time job at the library, claiming Lila needed her mother home more. "Besides," he'd said, "we don't need the money. My business is doing great. You should focus on being a better homemaker." He began managing all their finances, giving Claire a weekly allowance that he monitored carefully. "Just until you learn to budget properly," he explained when I asked about it during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Claire has a tendency to overspend. I'm teaching her responsibility. Teaching her dependency, more like." He went through her phone regularly, questioning any calls or texts. I knew because Claire started calling me from the grocery store pay phone, whispering quickly before hanging up when she heard a car door. "He checks my call log," she admitted once, her voice shaking. "He says it's because he worries about me, that I'm still too fragile from losing Ethan. He just wants to make sure I'm not spiraling into depression again." "Claire, that's not love. That's control. You don't understand, Mom. You didn't see how bad I was after Ethan died. Raymond saved me. He's just being protective." But I did understand. I understood that Raymond Burke was systematically breaking down my daughter-in-law's confidence, isolating her from everyone who might help her see the truth. The worst part was watching what it did to Lila. My granddaughter had always been bubbly, talkative, full of questions about everything. But now, at 6 years old, she'd become quiet and watchful. She studied Raymond's face before she spoke, gauging his mood. She apologized constantly, for spilling milk, for laughing too loud, for asking to play outside. One afternoon, I took her to the park while Claire ran errands. We sat on the swings, and I gently asked, "How are things at home, sweetheart? Are you happy?" Lila kicked her feet, making the swing move slightly. "I don't know." "You don't know if you're happy?" She shrugged, a gesture far too adult for such a small child. "Daddy Ray says I should be happy. He says we have a nice house and nice things and Mommy doesn't have to work anymore. He says I'm ungrateful if I'm not happy." My heart broke. "Lila, you're allowed to feel however you feel. Your feelings are yours, and they're always okay. But Daddy Ray says Mommy's feelings make her weak. He says that's why she cries sometimes. Because she's too emotional and can't control herself." I took a deep breath, fighting back rage. "Your mommy cries because she misses your daddy Ethan very much. And that's not weakness, sweetheart. That's love. Love is never weakness." Lila looked at me with those dark, serious eyes. "Daddy Ray says you fill Mommy's head with old-fashioned ideas. He says that's why she gets confused." I wanted to grab Lila, grab Claire, and run far away from Raymond Burke. But I couldn't. Not without proof of what he was doing. Not without risking losing them both entirely. Raymond's comments about money started becoming more frequent and more pointed. "You know, Abby," he said one Sunday when I stopped by with cookies for Lila, "Claire and I have been thinking about Lila's future. Private school, extracurriculars, college. It all adds up." "I'm sure it does," I said carefully, watching him over my coffee cup. "That trust fund you set up, it's admirable. But I wonder if the money might be better used now, for her current education, rather than sitting in some account for decades." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "After all, I'm her father. I should have some say in how her inheritance is managed. The trust is structured specifically for her long-term security," I said firmly. "It's not accessible for current expenses. That was George's wish, and I'm honoring it." Something dark flickered across Raymond's face before the pleasant mask returned. "Of course. I just think someone responsible should be managing these things. Someone who understands finances. No offense, Abby, but you're getting older. These decisions might be too complex for you to handle alone. Too complex. Too old." The condescension dripped from every word. "I'm 66 years old, Raymond, not senile. And I have excellent attorneys who handle everything properly. Attorneys who charge you a fortune, I'm sure." He smiled. "I'm just saying, as Lila's father and Claire's husband, it might make more sense for me to have oversight. Family should handle family business, don't you think?" "Stepfather," I corrected quietly. "You're Lila's stepfather. And the trust is not your business." The smile vanished. "Anything involving my daughter is my business." We stared at each other across the kitchen table, the friendly pretense finally stripped away. I saw the real Raymond Burke in that moment, calculating, cold, and completely focused on that $2 million. "I think I should go," I said, standing up. "Probably best," he agreed, not bothering to walk me to the door. 2 weeks later, I stopped by unexpectedly to drop off a birthday present for Lila. Claire was at the grocery store, and Raymond answered the door looking annoyed. "She's not here, Abby. You should call first. I just wanted to leave this for Lila." I held up the wrapped package. "Her birthday's tomorrow, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to make it to the party." He took the gift without thanking me. "Fine. I'll make sure she gets it." I was about to leave when I noticed my late husband's leather portfolio sitting on the dining room table. The one that had been in my home office. The one containing George's old financial records. Raymond, is that George's portfolio? He followed my gaze and had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. Oh, yeah. Claire mentioned you were cleaning out some storage. I offered to help sort through the financial documents. Some of it might be relevant for tax purposes. Claire has a key to my house. I kept my voice level, but my pulse was racing. Of course. We're family. He crossed his arms. Is that a problem? I walked over and picked up the portfolio. Papers were scattered across the table, bank statements, investment records, the original trust documents. Everything was there, laid out like Raymond had been conducting an investigation. This is private, I said, gathering the papers quickly. These are my personal financial records. And Lila's trust information, Raymond added, his voice sharp now. Which affects my family. I have a right to know what kind of money we're talking about here, Abbie. Especially when you're being so secretive about it. I turned to face him fully. I'm being protective, not secretive. And let me be very clear, Raymond, that trust is untouchable. It's structured specifically so that no one, including you, can access it before Lila turns 25. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you're going to do, it won't work. His expression hardened. Planning? I'm not planning anything. I'm simply trying to protect my family's interests. Someone has to be responsible here. No, I said, clutching the portfolio to my chest. You're trying to figure out how to get your hands on money that doesn't belong to you. And I won't tolerate it. Raymond took a step closer, and for the first time, I felt genuinely afraid of him. His voice dropped to something low and dangerous. You need to be very careful, Abbie. You're an elderly woman living alone, making accusations you can't prove. Claire depends on me. Lila depends on me. If you try to interfere in my family, you might find yourself on the outside looking in. Permanently. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. He smiled then, cold and empty. I'm only protecting what's best for the family. If you can't see that, maybe you're not as sharp as you think you are. I left without another word, my hands shaking so hard I could barely unlock my car. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, trying to calm down, trying to think clearly. Raymond had shown his true face. The question now was what to do about it. That night, Claire called me, her voice tight with anger. Mom, Raymond said you came by and accused him of stealing from you. That's not what happened, Claire. I found him going through George's financial records without permission. He was trying to help. He thought maybe there were documents we needed for Lila's trust. She was crying now. Why do you hate him so much? Why can't you just be happy that we're building a life together? Because he's not who you think he is, sweetheart. Please, just listen. No, you listen. Raymond has been nothing but good to me and Lila. He's provided for us, protected us, loved us. And all you do is criticize and question and make everything harder. Her voice broke. Maybe he's right. Maybe you are too old to see things clearly anymore. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, feeling the walls closing in. Raymond had Claire convinced that I was the problem. He'd isolated her so completely that she couldn't see the cage he'd built around her. 3 days later, Claire received the first letter from Raymond's attorney. She called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Mom, Raymond filed for divorce. He says I'm emotionally unstable. He says he's seeking full custody of Lila because I'm unfit. Oh, sweetheart. Come over right now. Bring Lila. We'll figure this out. I can't, she whispered. He says if I try to leave the house with Lila, he'll call the police. He says he has documentation proving I'm a flight risk. Mom, I'm so scared. What do I do? What Raymond was doing became crystal clear in that moment. He couldn't access the trust while Lila was with Claire and me. But if he could prove Claire unfit, if he could gain sole custody of Lila, he'd have control. He'd find a way to manipulate the system, to access that money somehow. And he was willing to destroy Claire completely to get it. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm calling Martin Chen right now, and we're going to fight this. But Mom, what if he's right? What if I am too broken to take care of her? You're not broken, Claire. You're being broken. There's a difference. And we're going to prove it. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about the man I'd welcomed into my family. The man who'd cried at my son's funeral. The man who'd promised to always be there for us. Raymond Burke had been planning this for 2 years. Every kindness, every gesture of support, every moment of seeming care, it had all been a long con leading to this moment. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated a grandmother's love. And he'd underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect my family. The war had begun. And I had no intention of losing. The divorce papers arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed them to Claire at her own front door. I was there within the hour, finding my daughter-in-law sitting at the kitchen table, still holding the documents, her face drained of all color. He's calling me mentally unstable, she whispered, her voice hollow. Neglectful. Emotionally unfit to care for Lila. I took the papers from her trembling hands and read through them, my rage building with every word. Raymond's attorney, Victor Ashford, one of the most expensive divorce lawyers in the state, had crafted a devastating portrait of Claire. Emotionally fragile since her first husband's death. Unable to maintain employment. Financially irresponsible. Prone to depression. Increasingly dependent on her elderly mother for basic decisions. Every statement was technically true, but stripped of context and weaponized into evidence of unfitness. We're going to fight this, I said firmly, pulling Claire into my arms as she broke down sobbing. I promise you, sweetheart. We're going to fight. But even as I said the words, I wondered if we had any chance at all. Raymond's legal strategy became brutally clear over the following weeks. His attorney filed motion after motion, each one painting Claire as more unstable, more dangerous to Lila's well-being. Photographs of Claire crying in the grocery store parking lot, looking disheveled and exhausted. Testimony from neighbors who'd heard arguments. Even a statement from Lila's pediatrician noting that Claire had seemed emotionally overwhelmed during a recent appointment. Each piece of evidence had been carefully collected, methodically archived, clearly planned long before Raymond filed for divorce. He's been building this case for months, said Janet Riverside, the attorney I'd hired for Claire. She was experienced in family law, but even she looked concerned. Maybe longer. Everything here is designed to paint a picture of progressive mental deterioration. But none of it's true, Claire protested. I'm sad sometimes, yes. I miss Ethan. But I'm not unstable. I take care of Lila. I love her. I know you do, honey, Janet said gently. But in court, perception becomes reality. And Raymond's team is very good at crafting perception. What troubled me most were the references in the divorce filings to joint marital assets and business interests that seemed oddly vague. So I called Martin Chen, our family attorney who'd handled George's estate. Martin, I need you to look into Raymond Burke's construction company. Something doesn't add up. What he discovered made my blood run cold. Burke Developments was drowning. The company owed nearly $900,000 to various creditors. Raymond had taken out multiple loans, many with predatory interest rates, and several were in default. The business was weeks away from bankruptcy. He's been moving money between accounts, Martin explained. Trying to hide assets from creditors. Some of these transfers look borderline fraudulent. And Abbie, he's been making inquiries about Lila's trust. Multiple inquiries. Asking different attorneys whether a custodial parent can access trust funds for a minor's current care. My hands went numb. And can he? Not with the way George structured it. But that doesn't mean Raymond won't petition the court to modify the terms if he gains custody. That's when I understood the full scope of Raymond's plan. He wasn't just trying to win custody. He was trying to access Lila's $2 million trust fund to save his failing business. My son's best friend was trying to steal his daughter's inheritance. Meanwhile, Claire was falling apart. Raymond had frozen their joint bank account, leaving her with almost nothing. She'd started having panic attacks, which Raymond's attorney somehow knew about and included in their latest filing as evidence of her deteriorating mental state. How does he know these things? Claire asked me one evening, her voice shaking. How does he know about the panic attack I had at the grocery store last week? He's watching you, I said quietly. Or he's had someone watching you. The worst part was watching what it did to Lila. My granddaughter had started parroting phrases that clearly came from Raymond's coaching. Mommy cries too much, she said one afternoon during our weekly visit. Daddy Ray says crying all the time means you're too sad to take care of people. And what do you think, sweetheart? I asked carefully. Lila frowned, concentrating. I think Mommy's sad because she misses Daddy Ethan. But Daddy Ray says that was a long time ago and Mommy should be over it by now. Lila, did Daddy Ray tell you to say these things? She looked down at her shoes. He says if the judge asks me questions, I should tell the truth. And the truth is Mommy cries and forgets to make dinner sometimes. Does Mommy forget to make dinner? Sometimes. When she's really sad. We have cereal. Lila's voice got smaller. Daddy Ray says cereal for dinner means Mommy's not doing her job right. I knelt down and took Lila's hands. Sweetheart, your mommy loves you more than anything in this world. Sometimes when people are sad, they need a little extra help. That doesn't make them bad. That makes them human. Daddy Ray says you always make excuses for Mommy. I could see the confusion in Lila's eyes, the way Raymond's words were tangling with her own feelings, making her doubt what she knew to be true. That night, I made a decision. If Raymond was going to play dirty, I needed to know exactly how dirty. I hired Sam Dillard, a private investigator Janet Riverside recommended. Sam was in his 50s, former police detective, with a reputation for being thorough and discreet. I need to know everything, I told him. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he's hiding. 3 weeks later, Sam called me to his office with a folder thick with photographs, bank records, phone logs, and a recording device. Mrs. Graham, Raymond Burke is having an affair with his secretary, Vanessa Chin. Has been for at least 6 months. He slid photographs across the desk, Raymond and a young woman entering a hotel, kissing in a parking garage. My stomach churned, but I wasn't surprised. Does Claire know? I don't think so. But here's where it gets interesting. Sam pulled out more documents. The business is completely insolvent. He's been taking out personal loans using fabricated financial statements, that's fraud. And he's been promising Vanessa things he can't afford. A beach house in Florida. A life of luxury. Sam leaned forward. Mrs. Graham, I managed to record one of his phone conversations with Vanessa. You need to hear this. He pressed play. Raymond's voice filled the office, just a few more weeks. Once the custody hearing is done and I have Lila, I can petition to access the trust fund. My lawyer thinks we have a solid case, using it for her education, her care, all that bullshit. Vanessa's voice, but I thought you said it was locked up until she's older? Raymond, there are ways around it. Especially if I'm her sole guardian and Claire's been declared unfit. The judge can modify trust terms if it's in the child's best interest. And I'll make damn sure it looks like it's in her best interest. Vanessa, how much are we talking? Raymond, $2 million. Abbie Graham's precious trust fund for her granddaughter. 2 million reasons to make sure Claire loses custody. Vanessa laughed. And here I thought you were fighting for Lila because you loved her. Raymond, love doesn't pay off 900 grand in debt. Love doesn't buy us that beach house you want. This is about survival, Vanessa. And I'm not going to let some grief-stricken widow and her senile mother-in-law stand in my way. The recording ended. I sat there in silence, feeling sick. Not shocked, I'd suspected this, but hearing Raymond say it so callously, reducing my granddaughter to a means of accessing money. There's more, Sam said. Evidence of fraudulent loan applications, forged financial statements, even a paper trail showing he's been coaching Lila on what to say in court. It's all here. How did you get all this? Sam smiled slightly. Let's just say I have sources. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I thought about Claire, defeated and broken. I thought about Lila being coached to betray her mother with lies. I thought about Ethan, who'd trusted this man as a brother. I want to wait, I said finally. Sam looked surprised. Wait? This evidence could blow his case apart right now. I know. But if we show our hand too early, he'll pivot. He'll find some way to explain it away. I met Sam's eyes. I want him confident. I want him convinced he's going to win. I want him to walk into that courtroom absolutely certain he's about to destroy us. And then I want to watch his world collapse. Sam nodded slowly, respect in his expression. You're playing a dangerous game. No, I said, gathering the evidence. Raymond's been playing a game. Chess, probably. Moving his pieces, thinking he's 3 steps ahead. I stood up, clutching the folder to my chest. But he forgot something important. He forgot that I taught my son Ethan how to play chess. And Ethan never lost a game to Raymond. Not once. The final custody hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks away. 6 weeks for Raymond to build his case, to coach Lila, to convince himself he'd won. 6 weeks for me to prepare for war. When the moment came, when he was most vulnerable, most exposed, most convinced of his victory, I would strike. And I would make sure he lost everything. He thought he was playing chess. But he forgot, I'd taught Ethan how to play. The custody hearing began on a gray Tuesday morning that felt like the end of the world. I sat beside Claire at the plaintiff's table, both of us wearing our best clothes, hers a navy dress from the thrift store, mine a simple gray suit I'd worn to George's funeral. Across the aisle, Raymond sat with Victor Ashford, his expensive attorney, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. He didn't even glance our way. Behind us in the gallery, Lila sat with a court-appointed guardian, clutching the sunflower doll I'd made her years ago. She looked so small on that hard wooden bench, her dark eyes wide and frightened. Judge Margaret Tilling entered, and we all stood. She was in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I'd researched her extensively. She had a reputation for being fair but no nonsense, focused on facts and evidence. Facts and evidence were exactly what Raymond had spent months manufacturing. Victor Ashford stood for opening statements, transforming the courtroom into his stage. He was polished, confident, speaking in measured tones that conveyed deep concern rather than aggression. Your Honor, this case is about a little girl who deserves stability and a parent capable of providing it. He paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back. The evidence will show that Claire Greystone, while loving her daughter, has been unable to recover from her first husband's tragic death. That her mental and emotional state has deteriorated to where she can no longer provide a stable home. He paused, letting that sink in. We will present testimony from neighbors, medical professionals, and documented evidence of concerning behavior. My client has provided a stable home, consistent care, and financial security. He's trying to ensure this child has the best possible chance at a healthy childhood. When he sat down, I wanted to scream. Every word was a lie wrapped in just enough truth to sound credible. Janet Riverside stood for our side, and I could see her nervousness. Your Honor, this case is about a grieving mother being punished for her grief. Claire Greystone has raised her daughter with love and dedication for 8 years. Yes, she's struggled since losing her husband. What widow wouldn't? But struggling is not the same as being unfit. It was a good opening, but Judge Tilling's expression remained neutral, unmoved. The next 3 days were brutal. Raymond's team called witness after witness. Mrs. Henderson testified she'd heard crying from Claire's house late at night. Dr. Patricia Walsh confirmed Claire had seemed overwhelmed and tearful during Lila's checkup. Mark Stevens spoke glowingly about Raymond's character and stability. They presented photographs, Claire looking exhausted at the grocery store, crying in her car, appearing disheveled at the park. Each image collected like evidence at a crime scene. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit M," Ashford said on the second day. Text messages from Mrs. Greystone to her mother showing excessive anxiety and repeated expressions of feeling overwhelmed and unable to cope. I watched Claire's face crumble as her private messages were read aloud and twisted into proof of incompetence. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," Ashford read with false sympathy. "Everything feels like too much. These are the words of someone in crisis, Your Honor. Not someone capable of providing stable care for a child." Janet objected, arguing context, but Judge Tilling allowed the messages into evidence. Each day, I watched Claire shrink a little more. She looked exactly like what Raymond's team was painting her as: broken, defeated, incapable. "Mrs. Greystone, is it true you've been unemployed for over a year?" Ashford asked during cross-examination. "Yes," Claire whispered. "Raymond suggested I stay home with Lila." "And is it true you depend financially on your elderly mother?" "She's been helping us, yes." "Helping? Or supporting you entirely because you're unable to support yourself?" "Objection," Janet said weakly. "Sustained," Judge Tilling said, but the damage was done. I sat there, hands clenched in my lap, watching Raymond's performance. He played the concerned father perfectly, wiping away tears, looking pained when Claire's struggles were described, projecting an image of a man who just wanted what was best for his stepdaughter. Only I could see the cold calculation in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Judge Tilling's expressions gave me no comfort. She asked pointed questions about Claire's employment history, her living situation, her support system. She seemed skeptical when Janet tried to paint Raymond's behavior as controlling. By the third day, even I was starting to lose hope. That afternoon, during a recess, I looked back at Lila in the gallery. She sat perfectly still, clutching her sunflower doll, her eyes moving between her mother and Raymond like she was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Our eyes met across the courtroom. Something passed between us in that moment, something wordless and profound. I saw in my granddaughter's face confusion, fear, and something else. Recognition, maybe. An understanding that something was terribly wrong. I gave her the smallest nod, trying to communicate strength. She nodded back, so slightly I almost missed it. When court resumed, Judge Tilling made an announcement that sent my heart racing. "I've heard extensive testimony from both sides," she said. "Tomorrow, I will hear directly from the child. Lila will have the opportunity to speak about her preferences and experiences. Given her age, I'll conduct this as an informal conversation, but it will be on the record and both parties will be present." Raymond's attorney looked pleased. They'd been coaching Lila for weeks, feeding her lines, preparing her to paint Claire as too sad, too overwhelmed, too broken. Claire grabbed my hand under the table, her fingers ice cold. "Mom, she's going to say exactly what Raymond taught her. We're going to lose." "No," I whispered back, though my own fear was suffocating. "We're not." But I didn't know if I believed it. That evening, I asked the court-appointed guardian if I could have a few minutes alone with Lila before bedtime. She was staying in temporary foster care during the hearing, Raymond's idea, approved by the judge. The guardian agreed to give us 15 minutes in a small conference room. Lila sat across from me, still clutching her sunflower doll. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "I don't like it here. I want to go home. But I don't know which home anymore." My heart broke. "I know this is confusing and scary. But your mommy loves you more than anything in the world. And so do I." "I know." Her voice was small. But Daddy Ray says Mommy's too sad. He says I need to tell the judge that tomorrow. I took a deep breath. Lila, what do you think? Not what Daddy Ray says. What do you think? She was quiet, her small fingers tracing the sunflowers on her doll's dress. I think Mommy's sad sometimes. But she still reads to me every night. She still makes me pancakes. She still hugs me when I'm scared. Lila looked up, her eyes glistening. Grandma, I heard Daddy Ray talking on the phone last week. He said he needs your money. He said something about a trust and $2 million. My blood ran cold. You heard that? She nodded. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard him in his office. He was talking to Miss Vanessa. He said once he gets me, he can get the money from you. What does that mean? So Lila knew. Not everything, but enough. She'd heard the truth in his own words. I took both her hands in mine. Lila, sweetheart, tomorrow when you talk to the judge, you're going to have to make a very important choice. You can say what Daddy Ray taught you to say. Or you can tell the truth about everything you've heard and seen. But Daddy Ray said if I don't help him, we'll all get in trouble. That's not true. The only person who'll get in trouble is someone who lies. I squeezed her hands gently. I know you're scared. I know this is hard. But always tell the truth, sweetheart. The truth is stronger than fear. Lila's lower lip trembled. What if I'm too scared? I pulled her into my arms. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared. And I'll be right there in that courtroom with you. When you look at me, I'll be sending you all my strength. When the guardian came to take her back, Lila hugged me one more time. Grandma, she whispered. I'll be brave tomorrow. I promise. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As I watched her walk away, I sent up a prayer to Ethan, to George, to anyone listening. Tomorrow, everything would be decided. Tomorrow, my 8-year-old granddaughter would either save us all or lose everything. And all I could do was hope that truth really was stronger than fear. The next morning, we returned to that same courtroom where everything had started to unravel. Where my 8-year-old granddaughter had stood up and asked a question that would change all our lives forever. Judge Tilling called the court to order, and the room fell silent. Lila, please come forward, she said gently. I watched my granddaughter walk to the witness chair, wearing the sunflower dress I'd sewn for her birthday. Her steps were small but steady. She climbed into the big leather seat, her feet dangling above the floor, clutching her sunflower doll in her lap. Judge Tilling smiled kindly. Lila, I just want to talk with you for a few minutes. You're not in any trouble. I just want to understand how you're feeling. Can you tell me about living with your mommy and Mr. Burke? Lila looked at Raymond, who gave her a small, warning smile. It's okay, sweetheart, he said smoothly. Just tell the truth like we practiced. Something in her eyes changed. She turned to the judge and said, Daddy Ray said if I told the truth, we'd all get in trouble. The courtroom went silent. Go on, Lila, Judge Tilling said softly. You can tell me anything. Daddy Ray said Mommy is too sad to take care of me, Lila continued, her voice trembling. But that's not true. Mommy makes pancakes and reads to me every night. He said if I help him win, we can buy a big house and go to Disney World. But then he said Grandma Abbie has lots of money and he needs it to pay his bad people back. Raymond shot up, his face red with fury. Shut up. Don't listen to her, she's confused. Judge Tilling's gavel slammed down like thunder. Mr. Burke, sit down immediately or you will be held in contempt of court. The bailiffs moved swiftly toward Raymond, positioning themselves on either side of him. He stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard, staring at Lila with pure rage. Lila's tears welled up, but she kept speaking. He said Grandma's money is in a trust for me, and if he wins, he can use it to fix his company. He said Grandma won't be around much longer anyway, so it doesn't matter. I gasped, my hand over my heart. The bailiff stepped closer to Raymond as he cursed under his breath. His lawyer tried to object, but Judge Tilling silenced him with a glare. Lila continued bravely, her voice growing stronger. He talks to a lady named Vanessa on the phone all the time. He told her they can buy a house in Florida when he gets the money. And he told me that if I don't say what he taught me, Mommy will lose me forever and it'll be all my fault. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed from the gallery. Raymond's face had gone from red to ashen. His attorney was frantically whispering to him, but Raymond just stood there, frozen. Judge Tilling called for order, her gavel slamming repeatedly. When silence finally fell, she turned to Janet Riverside. Counsel, do you have evidence to support these allegations? Janet stood, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Your Honor, we do. We have recordings of Mr. Burke discussing his plan to access the trust fund. We have photographic evidence of his affair with Vanessa Chen, his secretary. We have financial records showing his company, Burke Developments, is nearly $900,000 in debt. And we have documentation that he's been coaching the child to lie in court. She nodded to me, and I handed her the folder Sam Dillard had prepared. We also have evidence of fraudulent loan applications, forged financial statements, and witness tampering. All of it is documented and verified by a licensed private investigator. Victor Ashford was on his feet. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We had no notice of this evidence. Because you and your client were too busy fabricating your own evidence, Mr. Ashford, Judge Tilling said coldly. She turned to Raymond. Mr. Burke, approach the bench. Now. Raymond walked forward on shaky legs. I couldn't hear what Judge Tilling said to him and his attorney, but I saw Raymond's face go completely white. When they returned to their table, Judge Tilling addressed the courtroom. I've presided over family court for 23 years, and I have never seen such a calculated, manipulative abuse of the legal system. Her voice was steel. Mr. Burke, you have lied to this court. You have manipulated a child. You have fabricated evidence and coached witnesses. You have used grief as a weapon and this courtroom as a stage for your fraud. She turned to the bailiffs. Mr. Burke will be detained pending investigation into perjury, witness tampering, and fraud. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all his assets and accounts. Raymond tried to speak, but no words came out. Judge Tilling continued, her voice softening slightly as she looked at Claire. Mrs. Greystone, I am granting you full physical and legal custody of your daughter, effective immediately. Mr. Burke's visitation rights are suspended pending the outcome of criminal investigations. Claire collapsed into sobs beside me, her whole body shaking. Furthermore, Judge Tilling said, looking at Lila, young lady, you showed remarkable courage today. You told the truth when it was hardest to do so. That's what real bravery looks like. Lila nodded, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. The bailiffs led Raymond away. He didn't look back at any of us. Victor Ashford gathered his papers quickly, his face tight with barely contained anger at being blindsided. When the hearing ended, Lila ran straight into Claire's arms. They held each other, both crying, both laughing, both finally free. I walked over, tears in my own eyes. You were so brave, sweetheart, I said, kneeling beside them. Lila pulled back from Claire and looked at me with those dark eyes. Grandma, I dreamed about Grandpa last night. Grandpa Ethan and Grandpa George were both there. They said I should tell the truth, even if my voice shakes. Was that real? I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. I think it was as real as anything, sweetheart. And they'd both be so proud of you. We all are. Outside the courthouse, on the steps where sunlight finally broke through the gray clouds, Claire turned to me. Mom, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I let him come between us. I'm sorry I almost lost Lila because I was too broken to. Stop, I said firmly, taking her face in my hands. You're not broken. You were grieving. You were manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit that grief. None of this is your fault. But you tried to warn me. You knew. And you weren't ready to hear it yet. That's okay. What matters is we fought back. Together. She pulled me into a hug, and the three of us stood there on those courthouse steps, holding each other while the world moved around us. 3 months later, the full scope of Raymond's crimes came to light. The investigation revealed he'd been running his construction company into the ground for nearly 2 years, taking out fraudulent loans, forging documents, and stealing from clients. The affair with Vanessa had been going on for 8 months. He'd promised her a life of luxury funded entirely by money he planned to steal from an 8-year-old girl. Raymond Burke lost everything. His company went bankrupt. His assets were seized to repay creditors. Vanessa disappeared the moment the scandal broke, leaving him to face the consequences alone. He was charged with perjury, fraud, witness tampering, and embezzlement. The last I heard, he was working under probation while awaiting trial, living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, utterly alone. The $2 million trust remained intact, protected by the court, exactly as George had intended. Lila's future was secure. Claire and Lila moved into my house that same week. At first, it was supposed to be temporary, just until Claire got back on her feet. But as weeks turned into months, we realized we didn't want to live any other way. The house that had been so quiet after George died, so empty after Ethan's funeral, slowly filled with life again. Claire got her job back at the library, working part-time while she rebuilt her confidence. Lila started 3rd grade at a new school, where she made friends quickly and her teacher said she was thriving. Every morning, I'd make pancakes while Lila set the table and Claire made coffee. Every evening, we'd eat dinner together, talking about our days, making plans for the weekend. The laughter came back gradually, like flowers blooming after a long winter. Lila's giggles when we played board games. Claire's genuine smile when she talked about a book she discovered. The sound of music playing in the kitchen while we cooked together. One night, about 4 months after the trial, I was tucking Lila into bed when she asked, "Grandma, did we really win?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well, Daddy Ray lost his company and his money and everything. But we didn't get anything. We just got to stay together. Is that winning?" I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair back from her forehead. "Lila, we got everything that matters. We got truth. We got justice. We got to stay together as a family. That's not just winning, that's everything." She thought about this for a moment, then smiled. "Like the sunflowers. Exactly like the sunflowers. They don't need anything fancy. They just need light and truth and room to grow." "And love," Lila added. "And love," I agreed, kissing her forehead. As I walked downstairs that night, I could hear Claire humming in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. I paused in the doorway, watching my daughter-in-law move around the room with a lightness I hadn't seen in years. She caught me watching and smiled. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" "I'm thinking about how we almost lost everything," I said honestly. "How close we came to letting Raymond destroy us." "But we didn't," Claire said, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Because you never gave up. Because you taught Lila to be brave. Because you fought for us when I couldn't fight for myself." "No," I said, walking over to hug her. "We fought together. All 3 of us. That's what family does." Later that night, I stood in my bedroom looking at the photos on my dresser. George on our wedding day. Ethan as a little boy, holding his first baseball glove. Ethan and Claire on their wedding day, both so young and happy. Lila as a baby, cradled in her father's arms. So much loss. So much grief. So many battles fought and scars earned. But also so much love. So much resilience. So much proof that family, real family, can survive almost anything. I thought about Raymond Burke, alone in his small apartment, having lost everything he'd schemed for. I thought about how he'd underestimated us, underestimated a grieving widow, an elderly grandmother, and an 8-year-old girl. He'd thought he could manipulate the system, exploit our pain, and walk away with $2 million and a clear conscience. But he'd forgotten something crucial. Some battles aren't won with expensive lawyers or manufactured evidence. Some battles aren't won with money or power or manipulation. Sometimes, they're won by an 8-year-old girl in a sunflower dress who refuses to let lies steal her family's truth. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters.